Supreme Court questions obstruction charges brought against January 6 rioters and Trump. Oh, yeah? You don't say. The Supreme Court on Tuesday questioned whether federal prosecutors went too far in bringing obstruction charges against hundreds of participants in the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. Nice. Yep, that's true. A deliberate, explicit attempt to storm, to unlawfully storm the Capitol building to prevent the certification of the elector count is definitely not obstruction. That's such an exaggeration. The justices heard arguments over the charge of obstruction of a federal proceeding in the case of Joseph Fisher, a former Pennsylvania police officer who had been indicted for his role in disrupting Congress's certification of Biden's presidential election victory. Fisher is one of 330 people facing that charge, which stems from a law passed in the aftermath of the Enron financial scandal more than 2 decades ago to deal with the destruction of documents. It's so weird how so often in instances of a person's obvious misbehavior, the only way of going after them is through these incredibly weird niche. It's like how Roe v. Wade was based on like the right to privacy, you know? Is there really not just a pretty direct law for storming a government building while threatening to kill the people inside of it to stop? Really? Trump is facing 2 charges in a separate case brought by Jack Smith that could be knocked out with a favorable ruling from the nation's highest court. The justice will hear arguments over whether the former president and presumptive nominee for the 2024 presidential nomination has absolute immunity from prosecution in that case, a proposition that has so far been rejected by 2 lower courts. Hey, remember when the Supreme Court waited until the last possible second to accept this appeal, therefore drawing out the time as long as possible, and they're almost definitely going to say that Trump does have absolute immunity, giving them the maximum possible length of time before having to drop the hammer down on that. Now, treason is a very difficult standard to hit, Frost Throne. Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Ketanji Brown Jackson expressed interest in a more middle ground outcome. Jackson! Did you see Kyle Rittenhouse is set to speak at Kent today? No. It should be funny, though, considering the only thing that I know about Kyle Rittenhouse and what he's done over the past year was, apparently a bunch of leaked info about how he's actually 70 IQ. I don't know. Never really looked into that. Alito, suggesting the government's reading of the law is too broad, asked whether the charge could be applied to people who disrupted the day's court session by shouting, "Keep the J6 insurrectionists in jail." Are we really going to is the Supreme Court unironically going to present their jawlines and argue with a straight face to the world that protesters outside a building are the same as them storming into the building, breaking down police barricades, knocking through doors, breaking windows, all with the intent of stopping the presidential election? Are they fully going to argue that? He hastened to add, "What happened on January 6th was serious, and I'm not equating this with that. I don't believe you." Fisher was not part of the mob that forced lawmakers to flee the House and Senate chambers, Green wrote in court papers, noting that he entered the Capitol after Congress had recessed, the weight of the crowd pushing Fisher into a line of police inside. Really? Really? I mean, maybe the obstruction charge was the wrong charge to go with here. Some rioters have even won early release from prison while the appeal is pending over concerns they might end up serving longer than they should have if the Supreme Court rules against the Justice Department. They include Kevin Seafried, a Delaware man who threatened a black police officer with a pole attached to a Confederate battle flag as he stormed the Capitol. This is the guy we're worried might see too much time in prison. If you threatened a cop just regular, day to day, out and about, regular life, that could send your ass to prison for a long time. But doing it while trying to storm a Capitol building, you're using a weapon. Not to mention the racial element, black police officer, Confederate battle flag. Come on. The documents case still remains the strongest case against Trump. Yeah, it is ever the Capone thing, getting them on taxes, you know? Are we powerless to this? Quit whining. Okay, every time I cover anything even remotely, but you go, what can we do? It's so bad. Yeah, okay. Keep it to yourself. Are we powerless to this? Don't be rhetorical around me. What do you think? Are you a Supreme Court justice? You know the answer. Yeah, be like Guts from Berserk. Yeah, go vote in 2016 if you want to do something. Trump is struggling to stay awake at his first criminal trial. It's going to be a long 6 weeks. Okay. Does anybody think that his lawyers drugged him so he wouldn't say anything stupid to the judge? I give it a solid 50-50. Might actually be a good strategy, too. Just some Benadryl in his apple juice. Some Benadryl in the ketchup he puts on his steak or something. Jank is making excuses for him falling asleep in court. What? I don't get why everyone thinks Trump falling asleep in court is the greatest and funniest thing that has ever happened. I get that he calls Biden Sleepy Joe, hence there's some small humor in this, but man, otherwise people are making it. Where is this coming from? What? A former president is dozing off in court while facing criminal charges. What do you, like, okay, I don't know. Psyop, ghastly, whatever. The former president, who's 77, fighting to stay awake while he fights a 34-count criminal indictment brought by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I still have no idea if this is going to go anywhere. This is like a boring-ass set of charges. Trump refuses to be woke. Yeah, this is how anti-woke he is. Trump reportedly does not drink coffee, sticking to Diet Cokes for his caffeine. That's so funny. He's so him. Is he already intimidating jurors? How is he both sleepy and intimidating jurors? On social media? Yeah, I mean, like, how? Like, what did he say? The sleepy thing happened on Monday. The juror intimidation happened Tuesday. Maybe that's why his lawyer gave him Benadryl in his apple juice, you know? Maybe this is what they were trying to avoid. Senate kills the articles of impeachment against Alejandro Mayorkas. Really? The historic trial of the cabinet secretary barely got underway. Wow. I can't believe the Senate has failed. We've talked about this. Homeland Security, they impeached him, or they sent articles of impeachment against him because they think that he's allowing the invasion of America by brown people. Brown, Mexican, Hispanic, black armies of black MS-13 Mexican brown fentanyl drug dealer terrorists, Hamas. He let Hamas in. Yeah, the fentanyl race, exactly. Well, I'm glad that it got tossed out. The articles of impeachment killed by the Senate were for, quote, willful and systemic refusal to comply with the law and breach of public trust. So what they mean by refusal to comply with the law is you're letting too many darned illegals in. Chuck Schumer opened the proceedings by offering a time agreement to Republicans that would have allowed a certain amount of floor debate and votes on trial resolutions and points of order before an eventual vote to dismiss the case. Republican Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri objected, saying he would not agree to a proposal that would conclude with an unprecedented step in U.S. history of dismissing an impeachment case without a trial. Many Republicans wanted an agreement because it would have allowed them to make speeches on the floor about why they think a full trial should take place and other points. Without it, they will not be allowed to speak on the floor unless they get unanimous consent, except in the form of points of order that would be read aloud by the presiding officer. Oh my God, did they really? Wait, did they really? Made the motion to table or kill the first impeachment article because it does not allege conduct that rises to the level of a high crime or misdemeanor as required in the Constitution. After several rounds of procedural votes, the Senate passed the motion 51-48 with one voting present, killing the first article of impeachment. So the only remaining article was breach of public trust. After several more procedural votes, Schumer's motion to table the second article was also approved, killing the second article of impeachment by a party line vote of 51-49. Dude, it's so cool how even though this is an obviously fraudulent article or set of articles of impeachment, that every single Republican like voted in line. Isn't that cool? Isn't that great? Isn't it cool how like even when they're obviously lying, it's still all of them working together? Mayorkas is the first cabinet secretary to be impeached in almost 150 years. House Republicans voted to impeach Mayorkas in February over his handling of the southern border by a narrow margin after failing to do so in their first try. Just embarrassing for the Republicans, honestly. Just embarrassing. Go team. Many Republicans opposed quick dismissal. Mayorkas under a microscope. Yeah, okay. I guess this was expected. I mean, he was never going to get impeached anyway because they were never going to clear the 2/3 majority needed in the Senate. But I'm glad that it failed at this point because it's embarrassing for the Republicans. Vosh, it's kind of embarrassing for the country too. It's a little bit embarrassing for the country too. Yeah, that's definitely true.